guess if there's one homily in the liturgical year that you're not going to fall asleep, it's this one. I have a serious question for you. I know it's probably early on a Sunday morning for most of you. Serious question for you. If you were out hiking with a friend and he needed to lie down for about 15 minutes from sheer exhaustion, would you be worried? Would you be worried? Okay, good. I'm glad. I was concerned for you for a second. This happened to me late last October, just about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Now, I was on a 3-day hike with a friend of mine, and I'll be kind to my friend to say that he could lose a little weight, like perhaps the average weight of an 8 or a 10-year-old. How about that? And he insisted on us doing a difficult hike, a hike that is rated a 5 out of 5 as far as difficulty is concerned. That experience led me to buy an InReach Mini last week on a Black Friday sale. Do you know what an InReach is or what an InReach does? Anyone familiar with it? It's a GPS. Now, GPS is a global positioning system. It uses satellites, particularly when you hike or you camp. And one of the unique things about this particular GPS is that it can receive text messages and emails as well, even when you do not have a cell signal. So cell phones for us, because my friend and I were out hiking in a very remote part of the province, and there was no cell service. So suffice to say, if my friend ended up in any kind of trouble, we were in trouble because we had no cell service, so our cell phones were basically useless. This InReach, which is a unique and very valuable piece of equipment, particularly in times of trouble, will let you know and others know where you are in times of trouble. We're in our first week of our preaching series called Light Labor. And Father James explained a little bit about light labor. It might be curious for you because it's not your typical Advent preaching series. Light, we chose the word light because Christ is the light of the world. Christ is the light of the nations. We hear a lot of that during Advent. And labor because there's a lot of work involved if we want to be the kind of church that Jesus calls us to. Thus, the preaching series, Light Labor. We are in a beginning of a new liturgical year. This is day 1, and we thought it would be good to have a look at the upcoming year and what challenges or obstacles lie ahead in front of us. And to begin the preaching series, and throughout the preaching series, we're going to look at the state of the religious landscape in Canada. Between 2018 and 2022, the Angus Reid Institute, a national non-for-profit, nonpartisan public opinion research foundation, conducted a survey to measure the faith and spirituality landscape or situation in Canada. This survey was conducted across all provinces and territories, regions, across all denominations, all age groups, all genders. They interviewed faith communities and religions, as well as non-practicing or non-faithful people. This information is valuable to us because it helps us to realize the difficulties that we face as a church as we launch into a whole new year. It's important for us to know what we are up against with respect to the church and what the landscape we face if we are to labor in God's kingdom. In our gospel today, Jesus says to his disciples to be alert, to stay awake. He says, "What I say to you, I say to all. Keep awake." We must be watchful, as the research data tells us that in a very short 5 years, the landscape has changed and it will continue to change. We must be watchful, we must be alert, we must be aware. The Angus Reid survey reminds us of the sobering reality that many are not awake. So I wanted to share with you just 3 or 4 points, an overall look at the survey results that Angus Reid did. So here are some of the highlights. So between, again, 2018 and 2022, 5 years, there was a 37% drop in church attendance across all denominations. Not necessarily, that's not Catholic, that's all denominations. The group of non-believers, identified as non-believers, grew from 16% to 19%. And those who consider themselves spiritually uncertain grew from 38% to 46%. While those who live out their faith, who are considered spiritually committed, fell from 22% to 16%. Quebec is the most non-practicing religious region in the country. 52% of all Quebecers consider themselves non-religious, and only 9% of Quebecers practice their faith or who are considered religiously committed. That's the number one region across Canada who would basically be considered secular. Guess who's in the number 2 spot? Atlantic Canada. 19% of Atlantic Canadians consider themselves non-religious, and 18% of us consider ourselves religiously committed. And a large amount, and we lead the Canadian landscape in that religiously uncertain group at 45%. We lead the way in Canada as far as that particular group of how they identify themselves in Canada. Here are just 2 other interesting points that I found out from the research. The question was asked, how often, if at all, do you attend religious services? Okay, how often do you attend religious services? Rarely or never is how you would answer the question. Guess which denomination leads this group? Roman Catholics. At 67%. So 67% of Roman Catholics said that they rarely or never attend religious services, other than they excluded weddings and funerals. They took that out because most people would attend weddings and funerals out of obligation. You attend those. So they X'd those out, just dealt strictly with religious services. 67% of Roman Catholics. Again, we lead the nation as far as a faith group, a denomination, of how we answered this question. In a matter of just 5 years, we have seen a 19% rise in non-believers, 21% increase in people who consider themselves spiritually uncertain. This is a crisis across all faith traditions. And obviously, we notice that, COVID is involved in the middle of this, right? I have this sense of COVID complacency. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. COVID complacency is just basically COVID, because it was such a long and lasting part of the last 5 years. People's attitudes have changed. Their lifestyles have changed. They've adjusted how they live. COVID complacency is a real issue, and it's hard to break that complacency. Very difficult. But what should we do? What can we do? Father Dominic last weekend in his homily said there are 3 types of Christians: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. We are called to be diligent. We are called to be on guard, watchful, like the servant who does not know when the master returns. We are called to be a parish who not just watches what happens, wonders what happens, but makes things happen. This is a mission that Jesus has given to each and every one of us personally and as a church. On a hopeful note, that 45% spiritually uncertain in Atlantic Canada, those are the people we want to talk to as a church because they are open to the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. 45% of all Atlantic Canadians are spiritually uncertain. This is fertile ground for us and people who we want to talk to as a church. On the screen is a QR code and a link to the Angus Reid Institute survey. You can also get it at the hospitality desk. If you're familiar with how a QR code works, you take your phone, you open the camera and hold it up to that screen, and it will take you directly to the the Angus Institute, Reid Institute, the survey. It's also available at the welcome desks. Please grab it as you head out the front door after Mass. And it's also available on the front page of our website, ourladyofguadalupe.ca. We ask you to go to the Angus Reid website and read the survey. Have a look at it. There's lots of interesting and very useful data that we can use as a parish and as a church. It's important for us to know the landscape that we are dealing with as we begin a new liturgical year. Next week, Father James will continue this Advent preaching series, examining the obstacles that we face while we are on mission. So, anyone concerned about my poor friend? Yes? Do you want to know how we made out? All right, I'll tell you. Okay, well, you'll be relieved to know that he made out okay. It was a 5-hour hike in and a 5-hour hike out over 3 days. But he did survive our arduous task. He said it took him a week to recover. So things got pretty bad for him, and I didn't realize how bad until we were back to the car and got the backpacks off, and I just didn't appreciate how serious it was. This serious. He says, as we're walking, I am looking for places to where they might be able to land a chopper. That's how serious it was. He should have heeded the warning, because at the very start of the park, and you might know this park if you hike or camp, there's a very big sign as soon as you hit the trail, and it says, "This is no," big capital letters, "walk in the park." So after that experience, I felt I had a choice to make. Either buy an InReach Mini or find another hiking partner.